Hello again. This is, it is just the 27th of May, 2024.
Yep.
And we're like 2 minutes in, according to my clock.
2 minutes after midnight.
And yes, we've had a cup of tea and we're back and we're ready to try and be a little bit more coherent than last time.
Yes, indeed.
we did ramble a bit, didn't we?
We did, yeah. I think, to be fair, I think when we did the original series of videos, I think we covered a lot of ground, but I think it's fair to say it was it was a bit sort of rambly, wasn't it? It's weird actually for me because I used to work in work for a newspaper, and I interviewed lots of people over the years, and I sort of got quite used to asking questions and stuff. And funnily enough, some of the best times I sort of had with it a lot of the time were I'd have sort of a rough idea of things I wanted to ask, but the person would sort of often go off on tangents and things, and sometimes the tangents were more interesting than what I'd thought to ask them in the first place.
Yeah.
Sometimes, so I don't know. Maybe there's a good sort of quality in that as well.
And it is kind of what I'm trying to do with this channel.
Yeah.
Overall, how do autistic people express themselves and speak and form thoughts?
Yes.
What does it sound like to listen to autistic people speak?
And there's also such a variety of it as well, isn't there? I mean, I don't know whether we mentioned this last time, but I think it's worth mentioning. Just for interest's sake, is that I think a few people have said this, but the concept of spectrum in itself can be a bit sort of problematic, because you tend to think of a sort of a line, with sort of not autistic at all over here, and really, really autistic over here. And in actual fact,
really, really autistic.
I'm trying to think of a sort of a relatively neutral way of putting it, but if you think about it, the way I sort of think of it is it's almost like a snowflake or a fractal or something like that, and it goes out in lots of different kind of points.
Like the Pantone.
Yeah, like the Pantone.
Pantone colour wheel.
Yeah, exactly that. So like some people may have a big issue with sound, for example. So that bit would be really out here. But they're not too bad with, communication issues aren't such a thing for them, so that would only be smaller. So you end up with these kind of like lopsided-y kind of shapes, but they all look completely different. It's a weird thing, actually, because autism is one of those things that it impacts everything that you do and everything that you are, but at the same time, you're not it, if you know what I mean. Like, it's not all about you. It affects your life.
It's an aspect.
It's an aspect, yeah.
Yeah.
But it's not so, like we were saying before about, the interest that you have, the things that bring you sort of happiness or joy or whatever. They may be special interests that you sort of relinquish after the period of time, but they don't necessarily have to be. And of course, you can always kind of revisit things.
Yeah.
But what I'm sort of trying to get to is that your personality is still your personality. The things that you enjoy, the things that you value, the kind of those sorts of things. They're not sort of reducible, I don't think, to just formula or whatever.
Yeah.
Just sort of lists.
And there's a lot that makes up, who you are, other than being autistic. There's your culture and your beliefs that you were raised with and things.
Yeah.
Although, maybe we are more likely to, fall into certain areas of politics and religion and so on.
Yeah.
I mean we were saying earlier, weren't we? There's a lot of people on the left who are very autistic, but not very many who are on the far right.
Yeah, I in fact, actually, that's worth reiterating. One thing that I have noticed is that, I mean, I can't speak for obviously all content creators, because I mean, there's millions of you out there, but one thing that I've noticed is that if you go on a lot of YouTube channels, which are not even just stuff to do with autism necessarily, but anything that has a kind of what you might term a sort of helping kind of quality to it,
a how-to,
a sort of how-to thing, or the this channel is for people who have this particular whatever it is. I have noticed that, broadly speaking, either the person appears to be completely apolitical, there's no sort of political content on there whatsoever, or if there is, you very often find, and this is purely my opinion, I can't quote facts or figures to back this up.
This is an observation.
This is just an observation, that if they are, if they do sort of seem to have any kind of political sort of drive, they tend to be what I would term more on the liberal end of the political spectrum. It's rare that you'll get somebody who seems to be more kind of, let's say, conservative with a again, it's just an observation.
Although, to be fair, I haven't watched a lot of things by far-right people.
No, I haven't either. And I do wonder, actually, whether there is an element of... these people who sort of blanket deny the existence of sort of autism and say, there's nothing wrong with people. And maybe this is a little bit more of a thing in the US, where you get these sort of awful movements that say that they can cure autism and all that kind of thing. Whether that sort of...
squirting bleach up your arse.
Yeah, whether that sort of tends to ally more with certain political ideas, particularly sort of, conspiracy theory type. I don't know.
I think it probably does.
Yeah, very possibly. I mean, I know this isn't autism related, but when you were saying about the bleach of the bum thing, I mean, I remember, when sort of COVID was sort of going and watching some of Donald Trump's kind of...
Oh yeah, he was recommending the bleach.
Yeah,
wasn't
he was. So I've never heard someone like Donald Trump speak about autism particularly, but I can certainly imagine that perhaps there might be people who are right of centre, shall we say, who were more tempted to sort of say, there's nothing wrong with you, get on with it, kind of thing. I mean, again, I'm stereotyping, but just a thought and an observation, really.
Yeah.
But I don't know whether we sort of mentioned this, well, sort of last time, about the sort of the kind of the realisation and the sort of the diagnosis and everything, but would you sort of say that overall getting a diagnosis has not necessarily changed your life, but it's changed the way you live your life?
It's certainly changed my self-image a lot.
Yes.
And probably the way other people see me as well. Okay,
yeah.
I think a lot more people are a lot more understanding. They don't think I'm just being difficult or anything like that. And
yeah. I know...
when I'm autistic out.
Yeah, yeah, I can see what you sort of... I mean, I think, although I know, people sort of, have problems with sort of issues to do with functionality and things, and I think one of the sort of issues that I sort of find, and I think other people have sort of found, is when people sort of turn around and say, you don't look autistic.
No one's ever said that to me.
I don't think I've ever had it said directly, but I have had a few individuals who, when I've told, I can tell that they're not fully buying this. There is a sort of an element of, I'm not sure about this. They might not be rude enough to say so.
No one's ever said that to me.
Yeah.
I must look really autistic.
you must.
This is the face of autism.
This is the face of autism.
Yeah.
You have to get like a T-shirt. But aside from the sort of the obvious response of, well, what do you want me to do? How do you want me to be, kind of thing. I think it's like I was saying before about the sort of the different areas of support or whatever it is. Like, the trouble is that on certain days you may be able to do particular things, but on other days not.
Spiky
functioning. Now, if you think about it, this is something that with physical conditions we don't really have so much of a problem with.
Yeah.
So, for example, if somebody has asthma, for instance, asthma's a good one.
I was going to say fibromyalgia.
Yeah,
but that's the classic example of one that can be fantastic. On a good day and bad day. And
So on a if you go in for a hospital checkup or something, you might be quite able to get there, no problem. But on other days, it's really hard to kind of make the appointment because just leaving the house is a big thing. And I have noticed with because I think it's a lot of my issues I think are to do with social stuff tends to get me quite a lot. And I have noticed that if I go to something, even if I'm sort of feeling okay, the drain of the battery will be so sort of severe sometimes that, like, the following day I'll just be completely zonked out.
Yeah.
I might not necessarily need the whole day in bed or anything like that, but I certainly won't be, doing stuff that I would normally do. I'll be a bit kind of thing.
Yeah, I'll be sort of wanting a rest. Yeah.
And so when people sort of say, oh well, you don't necessarily appreciate how much effort has actually gone into the person just getting ready, putting clothes on, and leaving the house.
And I think as well, support for being autistic is, well, I mean, autism's quite a vague term in a lot of ways, isn't it? What support do you need?
Yeah.
I mean, it's more support for, going non-verbal, if that's your issue, or it's support for, having, sensory issues that mean you can't do certain activities, very specific activities, that, maybe if you talk to your boss at work and say, oh, I just really cannot stand going in this part of the building because of the lights and the smell, it really sets me out, I might have a panic attack or something, then they may not be able to understand that. They might think you're just sort of making something up.
Yeah, because for some reason, you're just being difficult or something. Yeah.
It's that thing of you try and explain yourself to someone, and it just sounds like you're being an attention seeker.
Yeah, and I think also you can kind of internalise that a bit sometimes as well, and you can almost kind of imagine what the sort of the negative reaction will be before you ask, so you don't ask.
Yeah.
But the trouble is that by not asking, you sort of are putting yourself in positions where you're struggling, and it makes it more likely that when you eventually do have the meltdown, it's going to be a biggie.
Yeah.
That I don't know about you, but I'm really bad at asking for help.
Yes.
I'm awful at asking for help.
Because all my life, I've been putting up with things that everyone else just gets on with, and everyone else says isn't a problem.
Me too.
And everyone else says, why are you making such a fuss?
Yeah.
At some point, maybe in my late childhood, I just sort of stopped asking anybody to do anything for me.
Yeah.
Because, what would be the point? They wouldn't do it.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I had that as well. I think there's an element of people pleasing in it as far as I'm sort of concerned. I sort of want people to kind of like me, or at least, see me as, I'm competent, I can manage kind of thing. When I first got diagnosed, I got myself one of those lanyard things, with the badge on.
The sunflower.
Yeah, and I've hardly ever used it. And really, there are occasions where I really should, and I kind of think, what's going on, but yeah, I don't know whether this is an issue for other people as well, but the whole asking for help or not asking for help, I think the other thing as well is that on the occasions where I kind of haven't asked for help, and then somebody later has said, well, why didn't you sort of ask about it? I'll sometimes say, well, in a funny way, I almost kind of didn't realise consciously it was an issue until it really blatantly was. Again, it's the insight thing, I suppose.
It's the voice in your head, of your parents telling you stop making such a fuss, isn't it?
Yeah. And I think one of the sort of good things about having the knowledge that you are is that at least you've got a bit more of a chance, I suppose, to kind of think, well, in the past I've been in these kinds of situations which has caused me stress or anxiety or whatever. So chances are if I go into a similar situation, unless, completely blind as it were, then it's going to do this, this and this. So maybe if I do have a word with somebody beforehand, things will be better. I've got more of a chance of sort of, making it through intact, as it were, without sort of, having a big meltdown or whatever, in front of groups or something. Or just simply saying, what sort of things can we do?
Yeah. I think the thing with the sunflower lanyard as well is, what kind of help do you want people to give you?
Yeah.
You know, if you're just walking around the shop with a sunflower lanyard on, what do you want people to do about that? What are you asking them to help you with?
Yeah, that's true. I suppose also another thing about it is the fact that sometimes there might not be much people can do.
Yeah.
But just the fact that they're kind of, you know, sympathetic, shall we say, can be helpful. I mean, for example, I had some issues with my phone a while ago, and I went to get it sorted out, and I was quite stressed anyway about one or two things. I can't remember what it was now, but you know, typical sort of thing. And I just mentioned in conversation that I got diagnosed with autism the other year, kind of thing. And the guy who was in the shop actually asked, "Oh, right, okay. Do you want us to try and turn the lights down a bit for you?"
Oh.
Which I thought was very nice.
Yeah,
I have to say.
That's a nice gesture.
It was a nice gesture, and although I was okay with them, that wasn't an issue for me at that time. I thought it was nice that he'd sort of asked. But sometimes you might be in an environment where they can't do something like that. They can't turn the lights down, or not turning them off or something, or whatever. But I think sometimes just the idea that somebody kind of is willing to do something.
Yeah, that they offered.
That they offered.
Yeah.
I think that's worth something.
Yeah.
It is. The trouble is, we in all sorts of ways, we're set up in a world that's really not designed for us, aren't we? I think. I mean, I think you were saying before earlier in the day, weren't you, about music, for instance? About everywhere that you go nowadays, especially if you're in towns and things, you've got music blaring at you, haven't you, from shops and so if sensitive hearing.
Every TV programme has music, every advert has music. You stroll through Facebook and every other post has music on it. Yeah.
So if that's an issue for you, then that's difficult, isn't it?
It is. You can't get away from the music.
Because you can't get away from it. Lights are an obvious one. There's all sorts of things. I mean, it's almost as I'm sure lots of people who have physical disabilities would probably say the same thing, but it's almost as though sometimes you sort of feel like sort of almost calling out wider society on this sort of stuff and saying, well, you want to kind of have like a thing on the wall going, hey, we're really inclusive and we help people, unless provided nobody actually does ask for help. And as soon as people do ask for help, we're a bit mystified as to what we should actually do about it. Because that's the sort of nature of the world that we've kind of created.
I remember it was on one. It might have been that Facebook group that you're on as well. One of my Facebook groups. Someone was asking, what accommodations should I ask for at work?
Yes. Yeah.
I said, well, what accommodations do you need?
Yeah. What sort of things do you need?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not always an easy question, is it? What would... It's a bit like saying, well, what would make you feel better?
Well, I don't know, because
I don't know.
I don't feel better. I've never felt better.
Yeah, there's lots of things we could try, but I don't know whether they would necessarily lead to me feeling better. Although having said that, I do think one thing might be a certain amount of flexibility. So, if you're really struggling with something, more regular breaks, for instance, or if that's possible, or, say if you work with computers or something, you feel...
Can you get a screen dimmer or something,
something like that. I mean, the trouble is you feel a bit like you're flailing in the air trying to catch at things a bit, don't you?
And just trying to think of anything that you could find,
I mean, I think one of the most kind of baleful phrases that we have in our society is the one about, was it reasonable accommodations? What
is a reasonable accommodation?
It's such a lawyer-like phrase, isn't it?
Yeah.
Reasonable accommodations. Well, the trouble is that doesn't really mean anything, does it? Because what's reasonable to one person might not be to somebody else.
Because I knew someone who was partially sighted.
Yeah. And
she was looking for a job, and there's just no jobs that you can do as well. That she could do as well as someone who was had 20/20 vision.
Yeah.
And there are things like she could have done a computer job and got a computer, this sort of specially adapted screen that she could zoom in and things. But then, that'd be asking the company to provide a computer specially for her and so on. But is that a reasonable accommodation? Because they wouldn't have to spend that extra money if they'd just employ someone who could see.
Yeah, and
you can you can sort of see why a business would be less inclined to hire someone who's blind in one eye. I mean, she I think she had just very, very, very poor vision. It's like being short-sighted, but to an extreme.
Yeah. The distance is really not too good.
Like she wore really strong glasses, and she could still sort of find a way around.
Yeah.
Without a guide dog or anything.
Yeah.
But what job could she do as well as someone who didn't have any sort of vision problems?
And I think also, I was going to say also the sort of, in a way, by let's say to make the adjustment, they buy you something. In effect, they've sort of invested the money in doing that.
Yeah.
So they've kind of invested in you personally, haven't they? So it sounds ridiculous, but like supposing they buy you something, and then in like 6 months' time you see a job offer come up, and it's a really good job offer. Are you then going to think, oh, gee,
it's a risk for the company?
Yeah, but also you yourself. Yeah. I mean, some people might be fine with that, but I know personally, like say if a company did that for me. And then by chance somebody said, hey, there's a position going at such and such a place, and it's more money, and you'd be great at it. I'd feel awful. Because they I mean, people do, don't they? But you know what I mean? It might make you think, well, actually, no, I don't think I can go for it in all good conscience or something. I mean, it is a sticky situation, I suppose.
Yeah. And it's things like, if someone who had a wheelchair got a job in a big office block.
Yeah.
And they had to install a lift so that they could get to their office.
Yeah.
Now, is that a reasonable accommodation, or would it be say, well, we'll give you your own special office on the ground floor?
Yeah.
And you get you can sort of tie yourself up in knots, thinking, but the company should be able to do this.
Yeah.
Or well, if it's a big multinational company, it's neither here nor there for them. But if it's just a one man wanting an admin, it'd be more difficult. And
this is sort of really why certain sort of workplaces are probably more, whether they're more likely to do it or not is another matter. But as you point out, I mean, if you're working for sort of an enormous company and money's no object, then potentially they could do it, couldn't they? But if it's like a small business or something, then that's obviously a lot more sort of difficult to do. I suppose things like home working and like the sort of thing we saw in the wake of COVID do probably help.
I mean, home working was absolute godsend for disabled people.
Yeah.
And video conferencing and so on.
Yeah.
And being able to order things online as well. That's been a really massive thing for people who can't get out.
Yeah.
For whatever reason.
Yeah. I mean, it sort of, we're still seeing the effects of it now, aren't we? I suppose to a large extent, it's sort of changed.
There's still people who are doing flexible working. I think a few days at home, a few days.
Yeah.
And my in-laws do that.
I mean, in a funny sort of way, it was a bit like a quiet revolution, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Because things continue to be done. It's just they were being done in a different sort of way.
Yeah.
And I think probably we've not really seen the kind of the tail end of this yet. It's this sort of wave that's still sort of continuing.
It was a massive and very fast cultural shift.
Yes, it was. And one that, as you sort of say, will certainly have had a sort of an impact on people with autism in the workplace. I can't remember what the statistic is now. Can you? How many of us have full time? It's a very small statistic, isn't it? Is it?
I think with statistics with autism, you start reading them and they find, oh yes, this is the statistics for America, or oh, this was the statistics in 2010 or something, and
well, didn't you say last time? I seem to remember you saying that. What was it when they sent you around your form that you had to fill in? With your initial pre-screening thing. Didn't it say something like copyright
1999.
That's right. Yeah, I couldn't remember the year, and it was, and it sort of tends to suggest that, you know, maybe attempts to kind of keep up with the. I appreciate, you know, they haven't got time to update it every year or something, but you'd think that it would be.
Yeah, sometime in the last 25 years.
Yeah. Maybe they
someone might have found more.
Yeah, maybe they could have done a better job, frankly,
Yeah.
of trying to address this sort of stuff. You know, particularly sort of given how much kind of knowledge has sort of changed. I did actually have a silly thought when talking about the work thing, which is
Best kind.
Huh?
Best kind.
Best kind. Which is, you know, the sort of stereotype of how many diagnosed or otherwise autistic people are involved in programming or the IT industry or whatever. Well, work from home, program from home. There you go. And that's probably what a lot of people think, won't they? They sort of, oh well, they're all in IT anyway, and stuff from home, it's fine. Sort of classic sort of stereotype, but yeah, it's something I think people don't often think about. You know, the impact on, you know, the sort of career, but yeah, I think if anything, the last few years has sort of shown us that you know, the world is changing, isn't it?
Yeah.
But not always necessarily as fast as we would like, or as much as we would like. And I think maybe if there's a sort of short, snappy takeaway, maybe it's that in the sort of short term thing. But at least we know change is possible.
Yes.
Make of that what you will.
But I think going back to the thing about the sunflower lanyards that you're talking about, I think, you know, you can put one on and think, oh yeah, well, hopefully people will be, you know, more understanding and more patient with me. But then on the flip side, you know, that it's kind of making yourself a target almost, isn't it?
Yeah, there is that sort of standing out, isn't it? Yeah. And
for someone who is going there to, you know, cause a fight.
Yeah.
You know, looking for some trouble. You know, you sort of put yourself out as a, you know, a sort of more vulnerable person.
And also, particularly as well, if you're in a public place, like say if you're on a train or something like that, or whatever, or you're in a town centre or something. Yeah, that's true actually. I mean, I think the last thing most people want to do is to sort of, want to sort of hop up and down and wave their arms and go, I'm different.
Yeah.
You know, particularly if they think that that's going to sort of draw negative attention or whatever. But I mean, I keep mine in my bag, to be honest. And as I say, there have been occasions where I probably should have used it, but as yet I haven't very much. I know when it was the sort of pandemic and everybody was sort of, you know, queuing and things, people were sort of using them then, weren't they? But whether there's been a...
Because you were exempt from masks.
You're exempt from masks, yeah. So whether there's been a sort of carryover from that or not, or people still use them, I don't know. And
then, you know, people were kind of singling out the people with the, you know, the sunflower lanyards, saying, no, you're using disabled people's things to get out using a mask. And,
yeah, my partner's a carer, so you know, she was able to sort of, you know, not get to the front, but you know, and you know, she heard people sort of complaining about that and stuff because she was like on the clock because she was having to, you know, and things like that. But I don't know. I mean, I suppose one of the big problems that we face probably is that as much as you can implement sort of small scale kind of things, what really needs to happen is kind of for society at large to kind of change the way that it thinks about disability and what constitutes disability.
Yeah.
But the trouble with that is it's by definition big and it's messy and it's very abstract. And if such a change did happen, it would probably take a few generations to realistically kick in. I mean, there must have been a time long ago where, going back to the asthma analogy, people didn't really understand about asthma.
Yeah.
And, you know, even before inhalers were invented, and people who were sort of living with it, it was either sort of said, oh well, you know, they just, you know, they always get a bit short of breath or whatever.
Well, someone who had, you know, severe asthma would probably die in childhood.
Yeah, that too. So in that sort of sense, you know, there was a sort of artificial effect of, you know, not society not getting it.
It's this thing in Victorian novels, oh, so-and-so was always weak and sickly.
Yes, yeah, consumptive or whatever. But the same is true of autism, because, I mean, there's always, you know, there's always been people around. You know, there's always been neurodivergent people around. And you sort of think to yourself, well, you know, there wasn't the education back then to explain why people did certain things. So unless they had some, you know, some sort of niche that worked for them, they might struggle. I've often thought, you know, medieval monasteries, for example, would probably, you know, as good a place as any for people in the past who struggle.
Yeah, some of us might get burned as witches, I suppose.
Well, that too.
Some of us might be hermits.
Yeah, ascetics or whatever the term is. But like in the sort of modern day world, now that we sort of know about these things, it's like we know about it, but we still haven't done very much about it. That's the sort of issue. I suppose the same thing really applies to lots of other things. It's almost like the environment, isn't it? You could, you know, like, you know, centuries ago, well, not centuries ago, decades ago, you know, we didn't know about global warming. Now we do, you know. But all the same, what have we done about it? Not very much, you know. And you know, and I mean, it's a funny analogy to use, comparing autism and global warming, but in principle, you know, you can, you know, loosely speaking, knowing that people have issues and then wanting to sort of do something and then actually doing it, but doing it in a way that actually genuinely does help people and doesn't just feel tokenistic and piecemeal. Yeah. And, you know, that's hard. Yeah. I mean, essentially what we need to do ultimately is change the world we live in. But, you know, but that's true of lots of things, isn't it? You know, right across the board. So, yeah, I mean, I know what you mean. I feel like laughing as well, but I don't know. Ultimately, though, that's what that's what it's aiming towards, isn't it? All the people who sort of sit on committees, you know, these sort of focus groups and things that they have. Ultimately, what are they trying to do? They're trying to make, you know, the world better for their members, whatever it is that they, you know, that their issue is. And I guess autism is the same, really. It's trying to sort of come up with things that will help people en masse without just feeling like, you know, we're just ticking a few boxes and then things go on as they are. But, you know, there you are.
And is there really much of an appetite for helping autistic? Because, of course, you know, autism is a broad church, isn't it? What sort of help do we need as a group? Yeah. Yeah. Obviously you can say, oh, yes, this person needs such and such. Yeah. But as autistic people as a whole, what do we actually need?
Yeah, that's another thing, because it's such a varied thing. It's not like, let's say, I don't know, you know, people with carpal tunnel syndrome, for example. You can have more severe or less severe. Yeah, you can have it operated on. Yeah, cured altogether. Yeah. But broadly speaking, the symptoms are bum 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 bum. And, you know, there are certain things that we can kind of do to mitigate this and this and this. Yeah.
You can diagnose it, you can say exactly what it is, you can say exactly how to cure it,
Yeah. But the thing with autism is that...
it's not an illness.
No, it isn't, although the...
It's like trying to cure having blonde hair.
Yeah, very much so. Or, I mean, I suppose there's you know, to sort of use a... becoming sort of less PC term, there's the sort of the comorbidity thing, isn't there? You know, that what I think it may even have been you who told me, or it might have been another friend, but you know, the fact is that people with autism are, you know, whatever percent more likely to die by suicide, for example, because they are more likely to than somebody who doesn't have, you know, an autistic person to, you know, have, you know, chronic anxiety, for example. Yeah. Or, you know, problems with, you know, social phobias and things like that, which can negatively affect your, you know, day-to-day sort of life. But you're right. I mean, it's not a curable thing because it isn't a it's not like a virus or something. It's just simply the way that your mind is wired in a particular way, different neurotype. I mean, it almost kind of goes back to the sort of philosophical thing, doesn't it? Of like the Matrix thing of if they could click their fingers and you wouldn't be autistic anymore, would you take it?
No.
No, I wouldn't either. Maybe there might be the odd day if I've been having a really tough time and I've been really getting frustrated with myself. But
then I'm sure realistic people also have days like that where they're frustrated about something.
I'm sure they do.
They have sort of problematic aspects of their personality. That,
why am I like this? Why do I do this?
Traumas from the past and so on.
Yeah. But
I mean, I'd be sort of interested to not be autistic for a day and see how different it is.
It would be very interesting, yes, because in a sense you'd be somebody else, wouldn't you?
Yeah,
you really would be somebody else, just inhabiting the same body. But I mean, I'm just thinking of the sensory thing alone. If you had somebody that for whom sensory things was a particular sort of issue, and for 24 hours they didn't have that, they would inevitably see and feel and experience the world in a completely different way, wouldn't they? And that's just the sensory stuff is perhaps the most immediately obvious.
Yeah. I do think, if I was completely neurotypical in every way, would I still see things, would I see colours the same way?
Yeah. Would you hear music the same way? Would you have the same relationship with the things that you enjoy? Like the sort of,
what do neurotypical people think when they're watching a film?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, the sort of, let's say if you're into a particular thing and you can remember lots of facts about it, do you not tend to remember as many facts about it? And then if somebody sort of asks you something about it, you tend to sort of say, why do you like it? Oh, well, I just do. And somehow it seems, I mean, I hate to say sort of shallower, but that's kind of what we're going towards, isn't it? Somehow it seems less sort of vivid. I mean, not suggesting that you have to be sort of autistic to have this sort of enjoyment, but nevertheless, I think it would change your relationship with things, wouldn't it? It would have to, I think.
And it'd be interesting to see as well, how much of my personality, my responses, my sort of likes and dislikes and fears and things are, because of autism, and how much are because of, my past as an autistic person.
Yeah.
Like having anxiety disorder and things. Is that something that I have because I'm autistic, or because I have been having a certain set of experiences as an autistic child?
Yeah, the same sort of things tend to recur, and it's a difficulty in sort of dealing with them or processing them or whatever. I think, like, one thing is we do tend to have, better than average long-term memories.
Yeah.
So
would I still be able to remember things from being 2?
Yeah.
If I suddenly wasn't autistic anymore, would I suddenly forget everything that happened until I was about 6?
Yeah, and particularly if there were things that happened at that sort of time that kind of first started to cause you, not something really awful necessarily, but just you'd had your first sort of experience that somebody isn't quite on the same page as you, and you still think about the conversation years later. If that wasn't there anymore, that would obviously affect, to some extent, the quality of life, because the anxiety that arises from it wouldn't be there, would it? Yeah, it's very interesting. I suppose it's like a game of Kaplunk, isn't it, where you pull out one thing and everything sort of comes tumbling down. For the benefit of anybody under the age of about 30, it was a game that was around in the 80s.
I think there is still Kaplunk.
Is there still?
I've
do it?
seen Kaplunk in the shops, but it looks a bit different. But it's more or less the same thing.
Maybe Jenga. I should have gone with Jenga, shouldn't I? I think probably more people would know Jenga, wouldn't they, than Kaplunk? I think nowadays.
Jenga's still very big. Yeah.
Yeah, I can say. As I've seen big giant ones and things, in hotel places and stuff like that. Some still have. So.
Coming up to 40 minutes. Shall we?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Shall we
Yeah.
stop for now? We'll stop for now.
Stop for now.